So yesterday I was walking in front of our refrigerator and I noticed a puddle in front of the freezer door. I opened it up and sure enough, everything in there looked like it was thawing out. The ice was melting, which is where the water was coming from. It wasn't broken. It was just not warm. It was cool. We have a little thermometer in there and it was around 50 degrees. So it was working, but it wasn't working correctly. The lights were working, the fan seemed to be working, everything was on, but it wasn't fully working. So here's the 4 things I checked and how I fixed the problem. And before I begin, for all these repairs, the only things I used were a multimeter, also called a voltmeter, and a 1/4-inch socket driver. You can also use just a straight screwdriver. So the first thing you should check, and it's the easiest thing to check, is dust on the coil. And you can either get to it by removing this guard on the front and trying to vacuum it out for the front, or you can get to it by pulling the refrigerator out and getting to the coil from the back, which is where it's located. So I pulled the refrigerator out and I got behind it and I took off this cardboard cover on the bottom, and it's held on with just these 4 little screws. And right behind it there's a metal coil. It kind of looks like a radiator. It's just a series of metal tubes. And there was dust on it, and I vacuumed all that off with the little vacuum extension, but it wasn't terribly bad, and I knew that wasn't the problem. But that's always the first and easiest thing to check, that coil is covered in dust and not working the right way. Now the second thing I checked is making sure all the fans work. There's a fan that blows over that coil, and that was spinning. There's also a fan inside here that blows the cold air through the refrigerator, and I could hear up at the top, up here on the back, that was also working. So that's the check number 2, and those 2 things were working fine. Now the third thing is actually inside of the freezer. And to get to it, you have to open the freezer and take out all the shelves. So for this third fix, it's actually right back here on this back panel. And again, same 1/4-inch driver or a straight flat screwdriver. You take off 1, 2, 3, 4 of those little screws, and you take off these shelves and you take that plate off. And inside is something that looks exactly like a radiator. It's metal, and that is what transfers the cold air. You could have a problem if that freezes up. If that freezes solid, it's not doing its job. And that would be an issue with a heat exchanger. So there's a defroster on the bottom. It gets cold, but instead of freezing over, it melts all that ice away, so it still can circulate the air. That could be another problem. You can just visually check it. I took mine off. Everything looked fine. It wasn't frozen over. Everything was working fine there. So I went to fix number 4, which turned out to be the problem. Now when I said in the beginning that everything seemed to be working, it turned out obviously something wasn't working right. The fans, the light, everything seemed to be, it sounded normal, except the compressor. You'll hear, every few seconds your refrigerator's compressor will turn on. You'll hear kind of air going into a tank. Usually that turns on as long as it needs that cold air, and then it will turn off. Well, mine, it would turn on for 5 seconds, and then I would hear tick, and it would turn off. It would wait a few minutes, it would tick to turn on and tick to turn off. It would only stay on for 5 seconds. So that's not an issue with the compressor, it's an issue with what's giving power to the compressor. And I'll show you what those things are. So let me show you the actual problem that I had where it turned on and turned off. You can hear it click, and I'll show you where this part is located on the back at the bottom, connected to the compressor.
So here I am behind the refrigerator with the old capacitor and start relay, and I'm going to try to recreate the condenser turning on for 5 seconds, hearing a pop, and then turning it off. So here we go. So there's the fan running. And I can hear the fan, which is up here, running. And it should take a second or a few seconds for the condenser to turn on. And then I hear a pop from one of those 2 things. The starting, there it's starting. And then it turns off. So that's how I know it's one of those two things, the capacitor or the relay. So time to take them out and test them.
So you could hear that tick that comes on for 5 seconds and ticks off. It's not kicking on. The capacitor gives it a boost of energy, 250 volts it says on here. And that's what gives that compressor a boost to tick on. That wasn't working. But I checked the capacitor and this was working fine. So I'll show you how to do that with a multimeter in a second. This part is the start relay. So this plugs into the compressor on this end and the capacitor plugs in on this end and power comes in up here. This turned out to be the bad part. Now some people said you could check it by shaking it, and if you hear a rattling noise, that only works with different types of start relays. There's multiple types. That could be a problem. You can also check it with the multimeter. But the big clue is you hear that tick. That tick where the compressor should turn on and it doesn't, then it's the start relay. So let me show you how I test this and how I test the capacitor so you can know which one is wrong and which part you need to order. So here is the capacitor and start relay that was on the back of my fridge. And again, mine kind of plugs in like that. That's how it was, and that's where it plugged into the compressor on the refrigerator, and that's where the cord came in. This pulls out. Now I took this all apart, and when I looked in here, there was a bunch of goop and stuff that had leaked on here. Something leaked out of the fridge and got onto this board and shorted this out. You can see burn marks, and there was all sorts of gunk in here. And that's one of the reasons why I knew this was the bad part. You can see it's burned back here and up here. I tried cleaning it off and reusing it. It didn't work. The capacitor, I think, is still good. It says 250 volt right on here, and it's 15 microfarads. Now, I have a basic multimeter. It does not read microfarads, but you can test this by putting it to the 2 million, which is just above 200K, and you can see that it slowly climbs. It's slowly taking a charge. And if I rotate these two, it will slowly go down. So just visually looking at it, nothing is bulged out on here, nothing is really wrong. And I think this is okay. So this part on Amazon is $50. This is a $50 part on Amazon. This part is $22. It varies based on what model you have. You can get some that are together for certain models that are only around 20 bucks. But for my refrigerator, my model, this was 50 and this was 22. So all I ordered was this part here, this start capacitor. If this doesn't do the job, I will get this just to check it as well. But for now, I'm just getting the part that I'm pretty sure is broken. Now to check if this part is bad, the start capacitor here, let me put it back together. So you can check it for continuity, and that is turning it to this dial here. You will need another wire here to join these two terminals where the cord plugs into. But I'm going to put it on this bottom and this right side. And then I will try to bridge these two terminals here. And you should have continuity there on the multimeter, which I am getting. Now you can check it from the bottom one and the one on the left. Which I'm also getting. And then you can check the two on the top. Which the two on the top, I believe, should work just as they are. You don't need to connect this, and this was not working. There you can see, again, this is all burned and something got in here and leaked on here. And if I remove it, you can see it's burned on the back of the circuit board. So that's kind of how I knew this was the bad part. Also, the 5-second and the big tick showed that this was the bad part, and it might be this here or the circuit board That's what was wrong. So that's why I needed to order this $50 part, but I believe this capacitor is still good. And you can see here it says 15 microfarads and 250 volts. That's the part number that I needed. For this one, the part number was that number right there. 241941003. This was part number 297286803. Okay, well it only took 3 days for the $50 starter relay to arrive, and again I'll put the link down in the description for the part you need. And the more eagle-eyed viewer might notice that this is no longer in our kitchen, it's in the garage. My wife said, I don't care if you fix it, we're getting a new one. So I'm still going to fix it because I have the part, and it should be just as simple as plugging in the capacitor, plugging this into the compressor, and hopefully it turns on. And here we are in the back of the fridge. Again, the capacitor plugs in through here and into these two slots. Just like that, it clicks in. And then this plug gets attached right here. That just pushes in like that. And then these three plugs plug into the compressor, which is a little bit tricky because there's not a lot of room to get your hand back in there. And this is the bottom plug, so the white goes on the bottom. It just presses in, kind of wiggle it a little bit. And the last part is putting this wire on, and this was a tricky thing to get. First you hook it under the bottom. It just clips in, and now we're ready to give it a test run. Time to plug it in, see how it works. I hear 3 beeps, and the compressor started right up. Okay, so I think I fixed it. It immediately started up the compressor. Before I had to plug it in and wait a few minutes for it to turn on. But this time I heard it start right up immediately, and it's still running. And when I check in the freezer, I'm definitely feeling cold air coming out of here. It's not just the fan. So up here as well. There's definite cold air blowing in immediately. So it seems like the decision I made just to order that start relay was the right one. It fired right up and is blowing cold air out. It seems like it did the fix. Had I tested that capacitor and that was also broken, I might have ordered just that, or to be safe, you can order both. But I'll put links for the parts down in the description. I hope this helps. I hope you're able to fix a refrigerator. As always, the actual repair isn't that hard. You're pulling a plug out, putting a new part in. It's the diagnosis that's the real hard part, figuring out what thing it is. You have to check those 4 things. I knew there was something wrong with the compressor, and it's that starter relay wasn't allowing it to stay on. So I bought the new start relay. Everything's fixed. So I hope this helps. Thanks.